So we're very privileged tonight. I've been looking forward to the story from the time I saw Damien's. I believe you were on a podcast with Lucas Adams years ago about this.
Yeah, just before
and
the
you
start.
had your whole house papered in maps. Must have been a killer with the ladies, I'm sure, as they walked in. With just maps everywhere. And that's what I remember of this. And Damien, I'm very excited to hear this. I think it's a story more people should hear. So we can put our hands together for Damien, please.
Okay. I'm gonna try and stand, I think. Okay. Yeah, that should work. Okay. Yeah. Firstly, Tyler, thanks so much for having us here. I thought everyone would have forgotten about this thing by now, and it's so I've had a really good time kind of going back through everything with a clear mind and reliving the memories, and it's been very inspiring hearing, Josh, your missions, and I must say I'm very envious of the crew you had with you. So a quick little summary. So I got into outdoor sports in about 2013 or so. I was trail running, I was mountain biking, I was heading out into the mountains. I was seeing super cool places, and then I suddenly realized, all of these places are freaking different from each other. And then the one day I looked at a map and I suddenly realized that there's this ridge line linking all of them together. And I thought, fuck, if these places are so clear, how amazing are all the places in between going to be? And so that's how this this project came about. This is South Africa, and down there in the bottom, this is the Cape Fold Belt. There's a light yellow line traversing it over there, and it's pretty wild. So basically, a few 100 million years ago, there were the Falklands Plateau attached to the bottom of South Africa. It was a massive landmass. It was bigger than the Himalayas, and it came. Basically, what happened? It plowed into the bottom of Africa, it pushed all the ground up, then it rolled onto the continent, and then it slipped down, and it left this giant, massive folded rock, that is made completely under pressure, and it particularly around Montague, you can see it really clearly how the rock literally just bent straight upwards, and it blew my mind, on top of that, so you got this incredible force that then creates a climate which creates the most biodiverse landscape in the world for its size. Fynbos has over 6,000 different species of plants, which means, in theory, as you're running through it, every 10 plus kilometers, you can literally see the vegetation and landscape changing in front of you. And I thought, geez, that sounds pretty cool. Anyway, and also I just think the idea of imagine the idea of traversing something on foot that's so beautiful, that was made with such force, has to carry something really significant within it. So that's what I started looking into. And it turned out I wasn't the first person to have this revelation. There was an organization called the Rim of Africa that already started conducting hikes over a period of months through this area. They were following the yellow line, which goes across there, 650 kilometers, starting at the top of Paquet's Pass and finishing on Robinson's Pass, which is just up from Mossel Bay. The nice thing about that was that, and this is another thing which is quite cool, was when I first spoke about this in 2018, there are a couple of sensitive issues, and I feel now it's long enough past that I can actually talk about these things. But one of the big things is access to land. You in this stretch over here, you cross well over 100 private properties. RIM has all the information for those properties, and they've also got the GPS files, which turn out are quite helpful. So I try to make friends with them, and they've got an ethos where they believe hiking is better than trail running because you move slower, you absorb your surroundings more. I came with a pitch, while trail running, you're moving fast, and the better you know your environment, the faster you can move through it. So we kind of getting at the same thing. And there was a bit of a love-hate thing with us for a while, and eventually they they kind of agreed to come on board. Ryan Sands had been looking into it. Amant Duplessis had been looking into it. I made contact with Amant, and that is the beginning of a very, very long friendship that we've had. And we decided we were going to team up and we were going to like try and do this thing together. So we started doing our homework. We started getting into recce's. And this is a basic outline of the different ranges that you go through. So you start off with the Cederberg. From there, you move into the Kohe-Bokkerveld, drop down to the Hex. Then the Langeberg begins, which they're fantastic stories of the Langeberg. That goes from Montague all the way through, or actually from De Doorns all the way through past Montague into, you guys will probably know, Marlith, Groot Vadersbos. And then from there you head into the Ataquas Pass, which leads you into the Outeniquas. And that's where kind of where Rim was kind of like cutting it short at that point. Sean is right. So what I did was I bought all the maps I needed to map the thing out. I needed 54 1 in 50,000 maps, and it covered my entire apartment at the time. Luckily, I was living with a geographer, so she was super stoked to have all these maps. We used to like make breakfast in the morning and analyze the elevation plots and what we could do. And we basically just started on one side of the apartment and just started working our way around. And then Amant and I, we decided we had to do our first recce. And what looked pretty cool was the stretch from De Doorns to Montague. So we called up Andrea Biffy, who was living in Montague at the time. We were like, hey, bud, we got this idea. Should we do it? And it was 80 kilometers. We were pretty sure we could do it like in a day if we pushed hard. Andrea, who knew the area better than us, said not a chance. We thought he was talking rubbish. And Amant and I said, well, no, it's going to be fine. He packed a slightly bigger bag. I got to drive in my first time driving in a Porsche. Amant had a Porsche at the time. I got to drive on the yellow. I got to drive on the handbrake because it's only a 2-seater all the way out to De Doorns at like 3 in the morning. We started our run, and it was freaking epic. Like we crossed ranges like you can see here. Then we got lost in a storm. There was a whiteout. We almost lost each other. Then we got benighted at the Rangiskop hut. We only had food for one day. Now we're in the second day. We woke up at 4 a.m. to get going, but it was still raining too hard. We got up at 6, and then we decided if we don't go now, we're actually screwed. There were many phone calls back to girlfriends at the time saying, listen, we're nearly there. It's just going to be another 2 hours or so. And that persisted for over 12 hours. We got in a lot of trouble. We had to do crazy down climbs in the rain. We eventually got into Montague, and we ran out of water. I think for the last, what planned to be one day turned into 2 days. We got into Montague at 7 o'clock in the evening. We only had 2 gels each for the whole of that second day, practically no water. And we were so rank when we got in that tourists were actually crossing the road, not to be close to us. One restaurant wouldn't serve Amant food. But we were hooked. We were like, at that point, there was no turning back. We were freaking in this thing. And we were like, okay, cool. So I started listing a whole bunch of other recce's onto my list. And just for reference, it turned into 1 year of preparation and planning. This was in the Tsitsikamma. This was coming into Marlith at sunrise. This was dropping down into Trudeau Pass. This was in the Kohe-Bokkerveld. This was another one from Marlith. And anyway, I was doing the homework. I was flipping loving it. What I'd do was I'd go on these 3-day missions. So I'd pin an area on a map, and then I'd find a local guy in the area that would work as a taxi, and then I would find 2 drop-off points where I could stash food, and then I'd drive my car to the furthest point. I'd get the taxi to pick me up, drive me to the start, and then I'd run for 3 days. and hoped that the baboons hadn't like stolen my food at the checkpoints. And for the record, even when Tupperwares are like duct tape closed and chained to a tree, baboons will still flipping like get in there like somehow. Anyway, but it was an exceptionally exciting like period. And then we got our first period of bad news. Like RIM said they wanted to pull out. They weren't, one guy in particular, but like they weren't stoked with the idea of us coming on board. I think they were afraid that if something went wrong, it could jeopardize the relationship with the landowners and all that. So all of a sudden we didn't have the GPS and the connections that we needed. So Mant and I did the natural thing that every trail runner does when they bleak. We cracked open a bottle of wine and we got very drunk. And then we decided we're going to look at the map again, and we realized that the Cape Fold Belt doesn't stop in Mossel Bay. It actually goes an extra 450 kilometers further and ends just outside of Port Elizabeth. And we're like, that's it, man. We're going to show these guys how it's done. So anyway, so now our run had just gone from 650 kilometers to what we were guessing was going to be roughly like 1,200. And the hangover hadn't kicked in yet, so it was a fantastic idea. Like, anyway, so this is what we started taking on, and then the concept that we eventually decided was, I mean, for a lot of this time, we wanted to follow the purest route, which was without being like ridiculous. So the objective was, if there's a ridge line, we follow it. If there's a path which is already constructed, which is a little bit off the ridge line, sure, we'll grab that. But in general, we want to be on the purest line across the ridge. The reality is there's pretty much 0 people up there. So we decided, okay, wherever we're going to cross a farm where there's a property or construction or anything where people are moving, we're going to ask for permission. Other than that, we're going to go through. And anyway, so this became the objective. It's like, let's be the first people to do the entirety of the Cape Fold range. So that brought us to the start. So we went up to Pakes Pass. My crew, so I had Marion Penso, who was going to be my support for the entire time. She was going to be driving with me, organizing accommodation, food, all that kind of stuff. We had decided, like, I was also like highly aspirational to do it self-supported, but as we looked into it, we realized that would actually take up to week-long detours to find towns and stores to get food and supplies and then get back on the ridge, and it just didn't seem viable. So I decided, okay, let's get a support van. Spoke around. Sadly, Amant was in the middle of closing a massive business deal, so he had to pull out, but he was very supportive on the side. My sister came on and dealt with the media and all that kind of stuff. And then I had Jared Paisley and Cy Pocock, who came on board to do a little bit of like photography for me, photos and videos, and another guy called Pierre Prince from PE who got the end. But mostly, they were all only joining for a handful of days. Marion was going to be with me in the car, meeting me wherever there was road access for the duration of the trip. So, yeah, 1st of September, we spoke to the RIM guys, and they had said September's the time to go. So we were like, flip, 1st of spring, let's dash out. We went up to Pakes Pass. Amant flagged that it was a gates-to-gates run. There's a gate at the top of Pakes Pass, and there's a gate at the entrance of the Groendal Nature Reserve, which is just outside of Uitenhage. And so I was going to run gate to gate. That was going to be the game. And yeah, keep it simple. Yeah. And the first day was flipping epic. Amant joined me for the first one. We headed out of Pakes, and it was just perfect conditions. Spirits were high. Everything was like absolutely great. Jared caught us like just before dropping into Driehoek. And that was kind of like the end of day one. Like spirits couldn't have been better. We were so excited to have this thing on the road after like so much planning and prep. It was actually like unbelievable. Sadly, that wasn't going to last very long. You were very wise to start in October because on day 2 a storm came in, and from Driehoek, it had been advised that we just push like beeline through the land towards Akerboom and not take the road. But the person that advised that had done it in summer. In winter, it was an absolute marshland, and with a giant storm, temperatures were already like in the single digits, and now we were like waist deep in water and like plowing through stuff, and you can just see a man trying to get through the water over there. Sorry for the quality of these. These are all screen grabs off GoPros. It was the only footage I had, and that's kind of like what it looked like from point of view. It was frickin' freezing. It took us an hour and a half to get from Driehoek to Akerboom. And I just put this in because my sense of humor was already like flat. Amant was fascinated by the fact that we were seeing a rainbow, and like I just wasn't getting to the end of it fast enough. Amant pushed on with me until Maltese Cross, which is where Jared was waiting for us as well. That is my farewell. And from there, I was having to push on solo. At this point, the weather took a drastic turn, like proper, like it's like winter's just ending. There are gale force winds coming off the top of the mountains, which are like iced, and it's like these wind chills like through the roof. And I was getting like, I was getting to the point where my body was burning, like, and I had to stop eating because I couldn't undo my pack, and eventually I had to eat. It took me about 10 minutes to undo my pack. Pulled out a sandwich. I took one bite, walked a couple of steps. I looked down, and I dropped the sandwich without even realizing it. It had like fallen out of my hand. And at that point, I was like, oof, okay, this is like not great. And I had to get to Citrusdal Pass. And like it was like, it's the closest I've come to hypothermia. Like I could feel my body like shutting down and just having this like, just this great aspiration to sleep, and just knowing that like if I sit down here, like I'm not going to be like getting back up again. And there's not a hell of a lot of reception as you in that window from like geyser pools down to Citrusdal Pass, and that is the first time I really thought to myself like, ooh, okay, this is like interesting, and it's day 2. But this was like this was my expression. Like I remember that. And it's interesting. They say with hypothermia, like it gets to this point of like unbearable pain, and then just beyond that, there's a moment where like everything feels normal and calm. But apparently that's your nervous system like shutting down, and that's when you're actually in like the real like danger zone. And all I can think right like in retrospect is that like the pain was so severe that like I can't believe I was much further like off that point. And I remember like the moment I got into reception, because I was actually meant to push further on this day. And like with the little window of reception I had, I just called my support. I was like, get down here now. Like this, I can't do this. Anyway, we bailed on Citrusdal Pass, warmed up, and I started, you can even see like I was like running in a puffy jacket, like, and it still wasn't like enough. Anyway, just to reiterate how cold it was, like, I mean, like, look how the snow was, like, hanging onto this renosterbos, and the wind was actually blowing the freeze, like, right across. There's another one where it's just, like, duck, eyes. I mean, it was like, I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and then it was funny, because then I went back to the guys that had said start in September. I was like, what the hell were you saying? Like, I started in September, it was awful weather, and they're like, no, but not in the beginning, in the end of September, you should have gone in the end. And I was like, fuck. That's not helpful right now. Anyway, so from there, so that was like 2 days in the Cedarburg, and now it's time to hit the Kobokkeveld. Luckily, the weather wasn't great, but it was clearing up a little bit. And this is the gateway that kind of like leads up off Citrusdal Pass into the Windhoek Mountains. And I was very excited to be here. If anyone's like missioned around Turret Peak, that kind of area, like, this is all of this game. So the game, so from where I am, I would have swung up to the right-hand side, and then the game was to follow that ridge line, all the way down. I'm just quickly checking my notes to see if I forgot anything. yeah, so I think I did the section in about 2 days. So that day I got up onto the ridge. I shot through some incredible terrain, past Charge Peak, made it onto the first, I can't remember the name of the dam, but there's one farm where we managed to get picked up there. And then the second day we pushed, the weather started getting bad again, pushed on, we dropped into the Witzenberg, Achter-Witzenberg Valley, and then onto like past the Ceres Dam, and then dropped into Ceres. That's the section we're talking about here. And yeah, and now it's starting to like, it's funny, like, so I was doing, it was the first time I was ever doing like sort of like 50, 60 plus days. And yeah, not on like easy terrain. And there's this one catch where like my favorite shoes are these La Sportivas, which are incredible, but you can't get them in the country. And I tried to order some, but they hadn't arrived in time. So I'd bought a pair of Ultras, which I'd never run in before. And that's what I'd been running in until now, which had been a drop from a 4 mil to a 0 mil drop. And I was starting to get like tendonitis like in my feet. And it was starting to get like pretty damn sore. And now again, like I'm on like day 4 or something. I've done like 200 Ks of a 1200 K run, and I'm like kind of like, oh geez, I'm like not feeling lekker, you know, like. And this was all starting to happen here. It was also coming past the Ceres Dam. It was also the first time I got caught in a hailstorm, yeah, it's quite interesting. So now the cold was behind me. The feet were freaking hurting, and it's quite interesting. Like if you talk to anyone that's done like an ultra endurance event, they talk about the breaking point. And it's like kind of like you've got your state of normality, which is like what all of us do in our basic day-to-day, 9 to 5, da-da-da-da-da. Now, but then beyond that, there's a reconditioning of the brain where you start saying, hey, what you consider your normality is no more. And everyone's got their different points. For me, that was like day 5. Like at day 5, I reached an absolute breaking point. And but what I learned afterwards was like after that breaking point, that becomes your new normal. Like waking up and just spending like 12 hours running is not thinking about anything else and just like gritting through whatever it is you're dealing with. That becomes what you understand to be like normal life. I didn't know this at the time, but like this is what was dawning on me right now. To give you a context of the terrain, like this is a lot of the stuff we were dealing with. Highly, highly slippery mud. Those shoes, so I couldn't wear my Ultras, so I'd resorted to my old La Sportivas. That pair had 350 Ks in, but were melted for a story I'll tell you later. And I had another pair with 1,500 Ks in them with like 0 tread. So I wasn't like doing too great like in these kind of conditions. And this was day 5, a point where like I was in such agony that I couldn't actually I couldn't. It was the most bizarre. I couldn't move my legs, in particular my ankles, but the pain was coming all the way up to my knees. Every step was like agony, and it got to the point where like I was actually walking backwards because that required me to like bend my feet less. Every time my foot did that, it was like the worst agonizing thing. And now we're doing it for like 50, 60 Ks a day. And yeah, anyway, that's what my feet looked like. They had swollen up to the point where you could like barely see my ankles. So the physio said that I had this like tendonitis, and this was like the make or break moment. So now we're sitting in Eerselfontein, which is on the outskirts of Ceres. And this was the absolute like make or break point in the entire run. Like I was in such pain. Like to be honest, I seriously didn't want to like continue. The physio turned around to me and said, "Look, this is what's happening. The sheaths around your tendons have swollen up so badly that your tendons can't actually move inside of them. The upside is that you're not going to do any permanent damage. So you actually just have to suck it up and push through this for the next 2 weeks or so, and then it's probably going to get better." And I was like, well, it's like probably going to be a month-long thing. That's like half the bloody trip, you know, that kind of. And then the other thing that was happening was I'd been running solo, and Cy and Jared were coming to join me to run over the hex. And I seriously think, like, if they weren't coming to join me that day, like, I probably would have pulled out. Like, it is absolutely, like, it's difficult to experience how excruciating every single step of, like a 10 to 12 hour mission was. Like, anyway, and to give context, this is how far we've come. So we started in Clanwilliam. Now we're sitting in Ceres. We've done roughly like 210 kilometers so far. An awful storm is coming in again. There was meant to be like a sky run through the hex that year, which they had cancelled because the storms had been too bad. And that was the exact same day that we were meant to like cross this off trail. The race was going to be on like a jeep track. Now we're going off trail over the hex, and we're thinking like, what the hell are we going into? This is kind of the context that we were dealing with the whole time. You'd see a storm, like that's pouring rain over there, and you'd see these like channels coming past you. And you just knew that if one of these things got you, you'd be like drenched and freezing. And at this point, we're in snow as well. And we were like, fuck, like kind of, this is going to get like...
Is that snow in the distance?
Yes, yeah, that's snow in the distance. And luckily, like no storm hit us. But this was a very common shame. I felt so sorry for Jared and Cy because they had to put up with a lot of this, where I just had to I was moving really, really slowly, and I'd grit it as much as I can. And then it got to the point where I was actually stuffing ice in my shoes to try and ice the swelling, to bring that down so that I could like take more steps. Of course, we were doing it. We wanted to be old school, so we were like doing all the nav by maps as well, which we persisted with for some reason. But I think after a year of looking at them, I was pretty sentimental on it. This was us coming over the top. We went up from Eerselfontein over Milner Peak. So this is like just topping out over the top there. That's what a lot of the down scramble looked like. Again, lots of sore expressions on the face. We did make one or two. It was interesting because I've rock climbed in Milner, but I've never actually hiked there. And like coming down, like was quite like disorientating. So we did have one or two wrong turns, but then we eventually found the gully that you got to drop down. And this is Jared coming down the gully that kind of leads into the kloof that takes you out to De Wet's farm. And then because of the slow movement, we of course got stuck in the dark. And then this was quite funny because this is one of the farms where we had to we have to go directly past the farmer's house. I had all his information. I phoned him a million times. He never wanted to answer. And I was like, well, if you're not going to help me, like, stuff you, I'm coming through. We ended up coming through at like 2 o'clock in the morning. And like, you're running into like this farm and there's like security dogs, like that you can hear like barking and jumping out of fences and you don't know where they're coming from. And then we're like hiding in these like vineyards and then running as fast as we can. And I think like at this point, Cy and Jared didn't know what they had got into. Like, I was starting to normalize this kind of stuff a little bit, I think, but like it turned into quite an eventful night. But we eventually got to Dodoens, I think like 2:30 in the morning or something like that. And then on the 7th, we decided to take my like only rest day. Like my feet were like flipping bad, like proper sore. And this became my standard procedure for the rest of the trip, like where as soon as I finished running, I'd take anti-inflammatories. We'd have a quick massage, ice them, and then elevate them. And I'd actually sleep with my feet elevated like this as well to try and reduce the swelling as much as I could before we could continue. So then after that, we headed out of Dodoens. So on the 8th, we headed out of Dodoens, and there's another funny story here because on one of the recce's, we had gone through Simmonskloof, which is a farm there, which is owned by one of the Rim of Africa guys. And he had said that he was what he called a Native American naked sweat lodge ceremony. And he was like, so long as I don't come during the naked sweat lodge ceremony, I'm allowed to cross his land. But now, because of the rest day, I was off targets. So now I couldn't cross his land, which is the direct line up. So I had to like skirt around the farm, take an extra day, and then come up Nooigedag to get back to Arankieskop. And then anyway, we got to the top, got it, yeah, it was very cool. Amant decided to come and join me as well. And Amant actually saved the day twice. Like the first time I didn't mention earlier, he actually managed to organize the only pair of Las Sportivas in my size in the entire country. And he got them to me like in Dedoorns. And then he came up and found us in Arranquis, which my entire crew had hiked up to the hut on top there, and then come to find me. And to this day, we still don't know what the hell happened, but someone broke into the Arranquis hut and stole all of our supplies. And we originally thought baboons, but it was far too orchestrated for it to be that. So I don't know where anyone got up there from, but we arrived at the hut and we had zero food, and people had scavenged through our gas cookers and all this kind of stuff. And so Amant saved the day a second time by running all the way down to the Protea Lodge at the bottom, got us extra supplies and missioned them all the way back up so that Sai and I could continue across the Vensterbank towards Montague the next day. Vensterbank, this is where the adventure was going to start. We're in the Langeberg. I always knew the Langeberg was going to be the most beautiful, but also the most difficult section of the trip. To give you context, if you look at this, it's the long. It basically looks like a giant dragon's tail. It's a spine like this that just goes for hundreds of kilometers. And so if you look at this picture, I'm standing on a ridge, and if you look off to the distant far right, you see a ridge line, ridge, that's my line for the next couple of 100 Ks. And it's glorious and beautiful and exceptional, but there's also no trails. It's highly technical terrain, and there's some massive drops. And the Vensterbank was going to be the first really big technical challenge of the trip. But yeah, this is what we woke up to on the morning of the 10th. We also lost our first drone this day. Gale force winds at sunrise are not kiff. This is what a lot of the terrain looks like. You're basically just pushing up between all the scrub and big rocks, and you're never quite sure what's underfoot. And then you look in front of you and you see stuff like this. And basically the highest point, that's what we're following. Then you get onto stuff like this, and it just gets sharp and you keep going. And I suppose if anyone's aspiring to do this, there's an interesting story here. So I was I couldn't afford to pay the photographers and all that. They were all doing it for free, and we underestimated the media attention this would get. And it was interesting, something like this where there's branding slap bang on the top of anything. Guys started hounding for these photographs, you can't believe. And it led to a bit of conflict because the guys were keen to get their names out and do stuff and and we hadn't really agreed all the T's and C's, and it was interesting. This was meant to be the leading shot for our film, but then it ended up being plastered all over UD's websites and all that without me even knowing. So a recommendation would be if you're getting into this, get your T's and C's in place up front, know where you stand, and it'll save conflict down the line. It was very steep ups, as you can see. Here, there's many sections where it's all very, very doable stuff. You can, especially if you've got some basic climbing experience, but you don't want to dork it. It's a long way down if you dork it. And then, again, you just moments like this where you just how did I get here? And that's your line in front of you. You'd climb for a couple of 100 meters and then drop a couple of 100 meters, and then look how sharp those dips are. And you're now I need to go a couple of 100 meters up again. There's zero respite. And it was and this is the section that Amant and Andrea and I recce'd. So we knew it, and there was there's no basically no water. You pack all your supplies and you go, and which means moving efficiently is your key friend. But it's you're always dabbling in this middle ground of absolute awe with the surrounding you're in, but then this ridiculous suffering you're going through. And I came up with this. It's funny. It really got me thinking about the concept of the beauty of mountains, and the spectator that looks at it from a distance and says, "Oh, this thing in front of me is beautiful." versus the feeling of like being a part of it, which you feel, which is like when you're standing on top of it and you understand its elements and what it means to get there and be like with it and a part of it and survive there. And this is like kind of what we're going through like right now. This is the Vensterbang. This is our first massive down climb, which it's first of all like it's a really difficult line to find. And there's probably like a 12 meter slightly overhung down climb you got to do, and then after that, which drops you onto like a 1 by 2 meter ledge, and then from that there's this ridiculous half scramble, half slide thing you got to do to get from the top of that ridgeline all the way to that first piece of grass at the bottom. Andrea and I had done that in the rain the first time, and so I was a little more confident this time round, but it was the first time where I really like, at least on a down climb, I thought, geez, like kind of like, it's funny because when I rock climb, I'm exceptionally safe. Trail running is the only time I get to like rock faces without ropes, and you end up doing stuff like this, and it was an interesting theory and philosophy. Like I said, there was no water en route, so what we do is we'd fill our flasks with ice. There's just like little patches like we could find like that, and then put it on our chest and just get the ice to melt, and then that would be our like water for the trip. And that was the vibe. That was the vibe. Like 10 odd days running and lots of death stares into the distance. Sai and I made it into Montague. Also, it was like, I think it was around midnight. By the time we had like prepped all the food and stuff for the next day, it was about 2 a.m. And this is at about 6 a.m. when we started doing all the strap ups and all that again, because the next day was the most like uncertain, well, one of the most uncertain parts of the trip. Lots of repairs being done, lots of pushing through like burnt proteas and stuff like that and getting ripped up to pieces. And if you want an idea of what nutrition looks like on a day like that, so I'd start the day with a giant bowl of oats, peanut butter, honey, cup of coffee. Then en route, I had 500 grams of dates, 500 grams of biltong, 2 tuna mayo sandwiches, 2 bananas, and 4 gels. Plus hydration, and I finished that every single day. So the next section was going from Montague across to Marlif, which I'd recce'd and been benighted, and I knew for a fact that there was no water, like zero water across the top. It was also from the freezing on the Cederberg, it was also starting to get pretty hot, and we're dealing with like 30-degree temperatures. And it was the first time where there was no road access, so I had no contact with anyone. So that was my pack for the trip. It weighed 8 kilograms. 4 kilograms of that was 4 liters of water, and that had to last me until the next time I could find water. So we headed out from Montague. If you guys have done the Cogmans, I first headed up Asphalt and then just beelined it straight up the ridge lines from there as far as I could go. Got to the top, and then and then the real interesting stuff started. That's the highest point is called Sarah Rafiersberg. That's the ridge line. I traversed Montague's like in the dip in the middle there before the background starts. And it was like I went through my Strava and I was like, I couldn't believe it was 15 kilometers. It took me 10 hours. And I was trying to juggle and think did it really take me that long? But there's more I look at it, I was like, yes, it does. Like you got like a couple 100 kilometers in your legs, 4 hours sleep, and now you're like winging it up this like particularly technical terrain. And it's like, this is really bad. The grass is in general about knee high. There are big rocks underneath. You never quite know what you're doing. There's a lot of scrambling. But somehow I was like still pretty stoked with life at 345 Ks, although I was moving like very slowly. So I decided to hunker down and get a nice rest. I found this little cave, and yeah, I thought let's just when I recce'd it, I tried to push through the night and I got shut down quite badly. So I thought let's sleep out most of the night, wake up at 4, and then like wing it again, which is what I did. I eventually got to the outskirts of Marlith. So if you look at this picture, so Marlith starts at the bottom of this valley in the middle. When I recce'd it, you might be able to see there's a small trail off to the right. That's actually an abandoned trail which leads into a 5-kilometer bush of protea, which is higher than your head, and that is exceptionally slow to move through. So I was going to gamble here and push clean up through the valley on the other side to where the highest peak is. I think that's 12-year peak, and then there's the protea hut like pretty close to that. So that is the destination. After 36 hours, I reached my first water point. So I'd had 4 liters of water for 36 hours in roughly 30-degree temperatures. And I was parched. I was like proper parched. And you might ask why I'm wearing my long johns. It's because I was pushing through terrain like this. And my top layer of skin had been completely taken off. It was so raw that I was eventually just like wearing whatever I could to like push through the scrub. I mean, you can kind of see my foot in the bottom there. Like basically how to get your foot as high as your knee to take one step forwards to like push through. And this just went on for like kilometers and kilometers and kilometers. And then just when you thought that is like enough, then you did the same thing, but you had to do it in the middle of the night. And you just push on again, more. And then eventually I got to the protea hut at about 3 o'clock in the morning. And I'm so happy no one was sleeping there because I was a freaking mess. And imagine like you think you're in like tranquil heaven, and next thing this dude like just bashes through your front door. But it was amazing. Like I'd been in the elements in this like really, really heavy wind for like almost like about 40 hours or so. And like it was the first time I felt stillness like in this moment. And it was the most bizarre feeling to like suddenly not have like noise in your ears and like pressure against your skin. And like I lay in this bed and it was so like unfamiliar to me that I was actually like quite nervous. And like it was the first time I'd had a bed and it was just a mattress. But it was actually quite difficult to fall asleep. I was like so like on edge from the whole thing. But then anyway, so then the next day I dropped down towards the Goedgeloof hut, and then we managed to get aid there again. So that is a 48-hour window that I went without support, which was the longest I went on the trip. And that's kind of how far we've gone to date. So we're sitting like roughly in the middle of the Langeberg, 450 Ks in. And then so then from Goedgeloof we pushed on over the top to Trudeau Pass, and we dropped down. And from there you're on the outskirts of the Grootvadersbos Trail. Sai joined me at this point again, which is cool. He ran up to the top with me, and it was just amazing to have a trail again. Like it was so amazing. Like even though it's like quite a long uphill, like just to be able to move freely, it was like really, really, really invigorating. But then he said cheers to me at the top, and then I went off trail back onto the ridge lines. And this is like quite amazing because it's like the Cape Fold is a real like weather predictor for the Karoo and the coast. And then you come to the top and you actually see how it like divides the weather, you know, and it was like this like freaking mind-boggling thing. And then you get to run across the top where you got like blue skies in the Karoo and this like absolute like storm like sitting on the coast side. That's a bit more of the terrain and what it looks like. Grootvadersbos eventually leads into the Sleeping Beauty Trail, which was closed at the time, but I know they've reopened. Yeah, I think they've reopened it quite recently. And then if you just cross the Garcias Pass, there's like a little trail that leads into the Langkloof. And this was the last like big piece of the puzzle. Other than I had to cross one farm and got electrocuted on this like cow fence, which was not great in the middle of the night. But then beyond that, like this, from what I could, this was one area where like I hadn't recce'd, and like if you looked at the topo, it was absurd, just like how like rugged it was. And for me, like, I mean, so for context, this is the 16th of February. It's taken me 16 days to do 490 Ks of like 1,200. Like this 2 week window has like it was so like it's difficult to explain how daunting it was. But basically every single day, like I had no idea how I was going to do like what I had to do ahead of me. Like the only thing that saved me was routine. Like it's just like hearing that alarm going off at 5, getting up, you know, like eating the oats, and just believing that this is the thing you consider normal to do. But I knew that if I could get through this section, life got easier. And yeah, so that's roughly where we're sitting at the moment. Langkloof is kind of above where Riversdale is, like roughly there if you go inland. And that's the terrain. Like it's just these, again, just follow the ridge line. That's where you got to go. Like it's just drop, up, drop, up, drop, up. And it's like, it's steep. And this is like to date, I'm yet to find someone that's actually like gone over here. And you feel it. Like the rock's very crumbly. It's highly overgrown. It's also the only time, in the Langkloof Valley is the only time I ever encountered a farmer. And I was like running up the road and he's like, "What are you doing here?" And I was like, "I'm running up that mountain." And he's like, "But this is private property." And I just said, "Yes, I know, but I'm on a tight schedule. I've run from the Cedarburg and I got to get there." And like, he's like, "But it's very dangerous." And I was like, yeah, I know. Like, do you mind if I like head on? He's like, okay. And that was, out of all the land fights we had, that was the only interaction I had. I put this one in because that down climb was I think that is the scariest like descent on the whole trip, just because of the quality of the rock and what you're dealing with. And although there's stuff there, like you're walking a lot on like loose vegetation and rocks, and you're not quite sure what's going on. And it kind of looks like this most of the time, where you've got like there's enough for a foot, you know, but again, like if you dork it, it's like a couple 100 meters down, and you're just like, and it's so funny because. Like a lot of the time you got no reception, you got no one with you, and you're entering this like incredible headspace of like self-reliance. You also know that it's not an option, like it's too far to turn back. You're on a ridge line, there's only one way down, and you just end up in this like absolute flow state with like self-reliance, and you're just like, I've got to do this. I can't sit down and cry, I can't like phone a friend. Like it's this way or no way, and you got one shot, and don't mess it up. And it's like a lot, like learning how to like condition yourself to like take that panic and like turn it into focus and not fear. Like was the most like exhilarating and like one of the greatest things I took out of this trip. The other thing is that this sort of stuff starts happening so frequently that nothing surprises you anymore. You're just like. You're going along and you're like, oh, now, you know, now we got to down climb this, you know, and then it's like, and then something else comes your way and like, oh, geez, now we got to do that. And it's amazing how you just start normalizing the most bizarre things, which if you're sitting in a health spa or something, you'd never like consider at all. But anyway, I got to the end. I started descending at dark again. Eventually made it down to a place called Warboom's where my aide could like pick me up. And that's what I looked like at the end of the Langeberg. I was toast. Not a lot of humor. But it wasn't over. But the upside was that life did start getting easier from here. Again, the cool thing, just notice like, so this is the Atakwas Pass. There's a mountain bike race that goes through there. But like, how incredible is the difference in vegetation and landscape in the mountains? It's like, it's incomparable to the Langeberg or the Hex and all that, and it's all the same place. Luckily, I got a little bit of trail here, so I could get in a couple Ks where I could actually like move again and stretch the legs, and it did a hell of a lot for the soul to feel like I was actually moving at like a respectable pace. Then yeah, we got to Robinson's Pass on the 18th of September. And this day was pretty cool because I became the first person to traverse further than the 610 Ks that Rim of Africa does. And so that is quite a cool like feather in the cap. But then that was very shortly lived because then I kind of learned why they probably stopped there. So I crossed the path, and then again I hadn't recce'd this area. I got to the junction where I thought I should like head down, and there was like one of these like 8-10 meter fences and like big no entry signs and and I was like, oh gee. And you kind of look around again, you got no one with you, so you're like, what do you do? And I was like, well, I've come this far, I need to like get over. So like I climb over this thing and I jump over the fence and I start my jogging. There's a nice little track. And then I start seeing these like albino springboks. And I'm like, geez, this is like pretty interesting, it's quite cool. And I got some bucks. Then I go a little further and I start seeing wildebeest and zebras. And now I'm thinking, okay, I've gone over this giant fence. There's all these wild animals. Like, I actually don't know if there are any predators in here. And I'm like, geez, what have I got myself into now? And then I go a little bit further, and then there's a bucky with guys that are like offloading food into troughs. And I'm like, oh, geez, if I get bust, I'm in trouble. And I wing it into a bush and I hide down until they drive off. And then I'm like, okay, I go to detour. So I look at the map. I find there's like a little valley, like just around to the side. So like I wing it through there, and now I'm off track and I'm pushing through these burnt proteas. And then, of course, it starts to hail. And now so those white streaks are hail. And now I don't know if there's like a lion around the corner or something and it's hailing, and like I'm seriously like doubting my life choices at this point. But anyway, all you can do is like keep going. So that's what we do. And this is probably why Rim stops at Robinson's Pass. But anyway, luckily that was fairly short-lived, and then we made it into the Outeniquas. Anyone that's run the Mutt, I got onto Montague Pass, all of that kind of stuff. If you enjoy dizzy heights, try do it with 650 Ks in your legs. It's a vibe. And again, like just how incredible is this landscape? Like the Outeniquas start changing from these like rugged mountains to these like flowing hills, but with like very sharp and steep curves. And the biggest like change in strategy is like with the Langeberg and a lot of the Cederberg and all that. Like the easiest place to run is on the ridge lines because it's not vegetated. You can like rock skip and get around, and it's super easy. Now all of a sudden everything's vegetated, and it's a freaking lust to like push through this like relentless bush. And if you get stuck in these cliffs, it's like it takes hours to do like 5Ks because you go so steep down and so steep up, and so it's this challenge of like having to navigate along this like a very coordinated route. But luckily for the first like I think it was either 75 or 90 Ks, I got onto the actual Outeniqua trail, so that was breezy. Like it was the first again just to be able to move, and it really is I think it's a really underrated trail. Like it really, really, really is beautiful. The one problem was that I had to get the first part of the trail's been shut down because of logging. So I had to, so coming through Bergplaats, like of course we came in the first thing in the morning as all the logging trucks were coming in with their laborers and all that, and their massive signs saying no mountain biking, no hiking, no da-da-da-da. And it was the only time I ran like 4-minute Ks in this whole trip was like trying to outrun these trucks to like dive into bushes so that they could like deliver their staff to cut down the trees and all that. And then again, just to show the difference in vegetation from fynbos and like little like bushes this high, now all of a sudden you're in forest. And it's absolutely mind-blowing. Also, the temperatures are rising, like from wind chills that were probably below zero, nowadays we're getting up to about 37 degrees. And like the whole game was like changing like dramatically. But yeah, so I eventually like pulled off the Outeniqua trail at Diepvalle, which is like kind of like just between Knysna and Plet. And this was, I must remember what slide I put on next. But anyway, this was going to be one of the like critical like last plays. Like basically, if I could get to the end of the Baviaanskloof, I was in the clear. But there was a bit of a story like leading into that. But just to feed you in, so that's Craddock Peak in the background, taken from the Garden Route National Park. In summary, there are three mega reserves which run from Knysna to the Addo Elephant. So it's Addo, Baviaans, and then the Addo. Again, like I said, it's the only place where I think there are 7 biomes within a single space like that. So the biodiversity and the animal life and all that is like absolutely incredible. Once again, like what I was saying about the navigated, the very like planned routes you need to take, like you got to avoid these kloofs because they just, like I know, so the Eden to Addo hike does one section like this. It's 5 kilometers and it takes the hikers an entire day to like get through. So you don't like, you really don't want to go down those things unless you have to, which makes like navigation like really important. And then on top of that, if you get into them, you're ending up in water, like up to your waist again. You also need to watch out for the snakes that like hang around on the sides. And then when you get onto the plateaus, you might get chased by a couple of ostriches. So there's like never a dull moment. And yeah, but anyway, okay, so to explain the Baviaans ordeal. So if you look, so this red line is kind of Dipval is in the end. This is the route I was following. It goes through the Garden Route National Park. Then you go through an area called Soetwater, which takes you onto, I think it's the R62 that you cross, which goes to Jobertina. I cross over that into an area called Brandhoek, which then goes across to an area called Skilderkrans. And then from that, you can get to the Baviaans Lodge, which is the border of the Baviaanskloof. If you've done the Trans-Baviaans mountain bike race, the blue route is the national road, the R9 that goes through there. And then this light blue line is the last stretch towards Groendal. So I recce'd this beforehand. And anyway, so we arrived at Skilderkrans. I had my friend Rasmus was with me. He was super stoked to be on board. And the idea was that he was going to drop me there. And then I was going to run up the red line, join onto the yellow line, and then come out at a camp called Geelhoutbos. He was going to drive around and then pick me up on the blue road at the other side. And it's roughly 60 Ks. In theory, there's trails there. We weren't quite sure of the quality. But I'm judging all of this off map work. I don't know anything more about the area. What I don't know is that I have to cross 2 private properties to get there. The one they've turned into this like 4-star private lodge. The second one, the guy's got a reputation of like shooting at people that comes onto his property. I spoke to a local in the area that sneaks onto farms to release leopard traps, and he reassured me that don't worry about the farmers. They shoot, but they shoot to miss. They just want to like scare you away. And so anyway, I pushed through that. Then I got onto the yellow line. I got onto eventually to Geelhoutbos. It was about 7 in the evening. It was starting to get cold, and my ride's like not there. He's not coming. I waited for about 2 hours. I knew I'd arrived a little bit late, but I thought, oh, why is he not here? Eventually, I had to get to, like, again, it's like there's one road in and out. I thought, well, he's not coming. I knew he was coming from Cambria side. I was like, let me just start running. It was 90 Ks to Cambria. I was like, but if I just go, I'm going to meet him sooner. And then, so I start jogging along. At this point, it's night, it's cold. I've already wrapped my space. I'm running in my space blanket. And then I see this, I eventually see one hut with like lights on. So I'm like, oh, let's go see what's happening there. So I go in, I'm like, hey guys, like, do you mind if I just make a phone call? Like, my phone's dead, like I need to call a mate. And they're like, what are you doing here? What are you doing? I was like, what do you mean? It's like, which boom did you come through? And I'm like, I didn't come through a boom. Like, I came in from the south, like there was nothing. And they're like, they're very aggressive and they're very like, uncertain of what's going on. Anyway, it turns out I'm at the ranger's hut, and they've erected booms on either side of the blue road of the reserve because they've introduced buffalo and rhino into the area. And of course, they don't want people poaching the buffalo. So now they're suspecting that I'm a rhino poacher. And so anyway, these guys detain me. They take me to the police station, and I get arrested on suspicion of being a rhino poacher, and I'm registered with the Graafrenet anti-rhino poaching unit. At the same time, they've called in this like anti-poaching unit to find my friend Rasmus, and now both of us are getting like cross-examined. I'm at the Baviaans police station, and it's a massive shit show. Anyway, but like remarkably, like they can't. But I mean, yeah, I'm in my poly shorts, like with my hydration pack. Like I don't have a gun, I don't have a horn, I don't have, like they got nothing to hold me on. But now they're still suspicious. But they can't throw me in a cell because they don't have any like justification. But there's like the closest town's Willowmore, which is 70 k's away. I'm like, now it's again like after midnight. I'm not making that dash. Like, so they end up taking me to the boom at the entrance of the gate, and they leave me with the security guard there. And I ended up having to like spoon the security guard for the night to keep warm. And that's when my yellow pair of shoes got melted because I put them next to the fire to dry out. And then he threw some logs on the fire, and then the fire like melted the shoes. And then the next day, and this is actually like, this is good information. Oh, we've got a lawyer in the crowd as well. So this is going to be interesting how it goes down. But anyway, so now I'm like, the next day I'm hanging out on the lawn of the police station. They're not allowing me to make any phone calls or anything like that. Fortunately, my friend Rasmus is a journalist. He knows how to investigate. He starts making calls around. Eventually, he calls that police station, and someone comes out to me and says, "Are you Damien?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "There's a phone call for you." I'm like, "Cool." And anyway, I chat to Rasmus, and he starts the 4-hour drive around the reserve because we don't have a 4x4 to get to the other side. And then I'm hanging around again. Like I haven't eaten for like the whole night. I had one gel to last me from like 8 p.m. until I think this is like probably 9 o'clock in the morning or something like that. And the groundsman takes me in. And he's like, "Bud, you must be like so hungry." And I'm like, yeah. He's like, "Yeah, come, I'll feed you." And like he had made two packs of 2-minute noodles with canned meatballs for his dinner the night before, and he had leftovers, and he shared his leftovers with me. And then he says, "Listen, I'm going to give you some advice." And I was like, yeah. And he's like, "Okay, so these guys are going to try to get you to admit guilt. You're going to pay a fine, and then they're going to say you can go scot-free." It's like, that's one option. The other option is you say, "I believe I'm not guilty, and I'm going to see my day in court." And I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Don't admit guilt, because then you get a criminal record, and they're going to take $1,500 from you. Say you're going to have your day in court, and don't pitch up, because they're never, ever, ever going to follow up on that." I'm like, "Okay, man, you've just fed me 2-minute noodles and meatballs. I'm going to like listen to you." So anyway, so I go in. I say I'm going to have my day in court. I bugger off. That was in July. Now it's late August, and my court date was 1 week before I was like planning to come back into the area again. So this is on the back of my mind. On top of that, I've now made contact with the Eden to Addo corridor group who hike through the region. They say, in their own words, like these like rangers are doers, like we can't deal with them anymore. And they're like, and they share some of their mapping and all that. And they're like, "Okay, you got 2 options. Either you do what you did, which is the easier route. You follow up the yellow line onto the road, and then you run the road, which is super easy running. But then you stand the risk of seeing a patrol vehicle on the road. And if you get bust, you're probably like in the Dwang. The other option, get up to Koenig, swing a right, and then wing it across the ridge lines for like as far as you can, drop down into the valley. The downside is that when you drop into the valley, that's where most of the buffalo feed. So you're probably going to have to deal with the buffaloes. And then for a brief period of time, you're on the road, and then you start that, just after Roy Hook, you start that crazy steep climb up towards the exit of the Baviaans Kloof. And then about 2/3 of the way up, you swing off onto the ridge line, and then you wing it to avoid the boom. You wing it across the end of the ridge line until you can drop down into Cambria. And I was like, buffaloes or rangers? I'm going to choose buffaloes. And off we go. So this was going to be, now this is pretty wild. So then so this was going to end up being the longest day of the trip. So it was going to be 80 kilometers, 2 private properties, and a potential interaction with buffaloes that I knew that was like ahead of me. But if I could get through that, I figured, okay, I've got this in the bag. So off we went, and everything goes pretty much as planned. It was funny. I found an old video, I think I went 6 hours without water. Like, again, there's just like nothing on top. But it's like at that point you're like, oh, okay, I've got my last 500 mils. Like, should I have it now or not? And like, it's funny how you just start to normalize these kind of things. And then night falls, and then yeah, at some points I dork my mapping, and I end up on this cliff face, and I don't quite know what's going on, and the map is saying one thing, and I've got like a thing on my phone, but like a Google Earth thing, and that's not making sense, and I can't find any trails, and then I start finding these areas which are just like trampled bush, and I'm like following, and it's like the only way like through these bushes, and I'm going, and then there's these giant like turds, and then yes, and then all of a sudden, yeah, it's about 10 o'clock at night, and I just suddenly hear these grunts and these like noises which are like have such a deep volume that it kind of makes you like reverberate a little bit, and then the sudden like stampering on the ground, and you could actually feel the ground like shake underneath you, and I was just like, oh God, like this is what's going on, and I'm just like I started by just lying like dead still and thinking like don't like just whatever you do, like don't move, but it wasn't, and then I tried to move. I realized I can't stay here the whole night, so I tried to move, and then these I'd hear them again, and it was clear like they were definitely within like a couple meters. I couldn't see anything, but probably within 50 meters, I reckon they were like around me, like, and then I remember thinking like, okay, like just sit down, think like what's happening, and I suddenly realized like erratic movements like freaked them out. Like if I tried to run and stop, and that triggered them. And the other thing that triggered them was my headlamp. If I turned on the lights, then there was cuck. And I was like, okay, like bottom line, kind of animals, like I don't know them exactly, but I know they've got good smell, that they've heard me, they know I'm here. Like, and I was like, okay, well, maybe the trick is just to own my space and say like, here's where I'm at. Like, hey guys, I'm just going to Cambria, and that's what I decided to do. So I was just, and this became one of it was still one of the most like liberating and like euphoric moments of my life. So I just decided no matter what, I'm going to hold my stride and just go. Like, and it's pitch dark. It was just off full moon. I turned off my lights and I just ran into the darkness, like just hoping I had it. And I was just like, I had no idea what was under my feet, and I was just say you're going forwards, and you like not an issue to them. And I got through this, like eventually got through the scrub and all that, and then I got down to the road, and I'll never forget, I heard water. I heard it for the first time, and I was like, here we go. I got down to the water, I turned on my light, and I just saw like 20 pairs of eyes in front of me, and I was like, I'm not going to drink here. And I was like, but I got onto the road, and this was where it really got incredible. It was like, because I knew the road was smooth, like it's a Jeep track, like, but I just ran probably for about like 15 Ks, uncertain of what my next step was going to land on. And like there were moments where you just like, it was incredible how crisp the like cold air and all that like felt in my face. And there were moments where you just see like a silhouette of an animal just like shoot across in front of you, and you just hold your space, and and it just went like uncertain of your next step for like 15 Ks. But like I've never felt so like in the zone and on it, like in all of my life. Like, and then I got like eventually like I got through this, and then I got up to, I found the little like ridge where I had to pull off, and then I had a brief moment where I got chased by a porcupine and got away, and then at about 4 o'clock in the morning, I got to the like outskirts of the reserve. Oh, sorry, I forgot. And I mean, this is just like the kind of landscape that you're running through. It's these like most incredible, like rolling lines. And it's just they just go on for miles, and it's just incredible. Like you really feel so far away from everything and so independent, and it really is like it's a reason it's a World Heritage space. Yeah, that was going into darkness. That was kind of like what the trails looked like that I was trying to push through. And then it was quite cool because when I woke up the next morning, I clocked over 1,000 Ks. And that was, I think after 2 hours sleep, that was me waking up on the border of Cambria. Then the next day, there's just one more section of the Baviaanskloof that goes to the Coxcomb section. I'd recce'd this, and I'd stepped on a hell of a lot of these thorns. So I was very stoked that now I knew where they had fallen onto the ground and where they hadn't. And then, at the end of that day, we got to the border of the Baviaans National Park. And this was a flipping big moment because I knew from there was tracks all the way across the Eastern Cape's Grootwinterhoek, like to Groendel, and this is the first time that I actually felt like I might have this like in the bag. And that's after 1,070 Ks of running and 29 days of missioning. So we're down, so I think we're a little bit above like St. Francis, like at this point. But I wasn't quite over yet. It was 2 days in the Grootwinterhoek, and then we hit the Groendel Reserve, which was the last. It was the last day of the mission. It was super great. Like some friends and family had like come down to see me on the finish line. There was a lot of cheers and excitement. What I didn't realize was that this was going to be the thickest bush I'd pushed through on the entire trip. And I got to the border of the reserve. Of course, once upon a time there was a trail. There's nothing there now. And there was a lot of pushing through this on this like very sharp, thick scrub. And like this went on for like hours and hours. And then just when you thought that couldn't get any worse, then there were these like burnt thorns that would push right through your shoe. And on like multiple occasions, like I had to like stop and pull these like thorns out of that are penetrating right into my feet. I was eventually like 4 hours like behind schedule. But I eventually like bumped into Pierre, who is a photographer I'd never met before from PE, and had been delegated to try and find me coming from like the western side of the park, but again, not on a trail, just like look at the ridge line. And then eventually we got to the other gate. 30 days, 9 hours, 29 minutes later, 48,000 meters of elevation. 1,136 Ks. Yeah. Yeah, that was all my good mates, and the guy on the far right was actually a fan from Uitenhage that I just heard about it. So I was like, I felt stoked. I got a fan. Yeah. That was a before and after pic. Stoked, but a little weathered. Yeah, and then it was time for a bath. Yeah. Thanks, guys. I hope it didn't take too long. You can run if you want. Yeah.
I don't know what you say after that, right? Like, as Damien was telling that story, did you notice how excited he was getting? And how nervous his family was getting? I don't know if you're allowed to do those things anymore.
Yeah.
But like that story, I mean, all of us watch those terrible trail videos that go on, right? Like we're always following these stories. But that thing's way more epic than anything you've seen out there, right? And it just doesn't get told. So like we have legitimate, like, I hate when people call people legends and heroes and all that. But Damien is one of those without telling people it. And he still gets out for a full day of work as well. Runs around with his camera, makes all of us look good. Except possibly me, because that's impossible. Do we have any questions for Damien? Except, can I go with you on the next one?
Is that a basin?
It's the world's smallest one. Welcome to PE. One day we'll move to Cape Town.
There is actually a cool story behind this because I told you about these taxi drivers that picked me up. I had one recce where I injured my knee and I had to abandon early. And I had to call this guy up and I'm like, I know you're not meant to see me, but I've got nowhere to go. I don't know who to phone. Can you come and pick me up? and he was bleak because he was actually moving house. And he ended up picking me up and letting me intercept one of his date nights in this like artist's house that he had like organized for him and his girlfriend. And then this random dude he doesn't know at all, gate crashes, and then he still puts me up in the bath and gives me a line. And yeah, it's awesome.
Do you know how much oats you ate?
I probably had about 300 grams a day for 30 days. You're a good maths person, so you can work it out.
Follow-up question.
Yeah.
Can he still eat oats?
Every day.
Yeah.
Every day. Look at that. Just that monotony of
Yeah.
Anyone else? Aiden?
Yeah.
After this adventure, what's your first meal you had?
Do you know what it was? There's another funny story there. It was a Debonairs pizza. Yes, yeah. No, my mates had brought. It was actually absolutely ridiculous. But I've got one friend that had just sold a business and made a cuck ton of money, and no.
What a mate.
No, he chartered a jet. So I had to he flew us back in a jet, and I was still covered in ash. Like I went through the airport in my running kit, absolutely rank after I think it was 9 hours of running, covered in ash, and now I'm on a jet and eating Debonairs pizza and drinking wine. And I was just it was this absolute mindfuck moment where I was like, what world have I I've never done that in my life before, but it happens here. Yeah.
Damien, have you ever returned back to the Babians nature reserve to go side your friend?
Sorry, to hi?
To go side to the rangers?
Yes. No, I haven't said hi to the Rangers, but I did end up running the Eden to Addo route. So we did another 360k run from the Addo to Neisner. And then we crossed through there again, but I think they've forgotten about me now. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And what was the kind of time frames around inception of the idea, planning phases, and then obviously the execution?
There was roughly a year of prep.
Okay.
Yeah. It started with, this would be a cool thing to do.
Yeah.
And then it was oh gee, this is actually pretty big. We need to do some recce's. And then it was geez, we actually need to fundraise a little bit because it's going to be a bit costly and it's a month out of your life. And and so it ended up being about a year. Yeah.
Damien, do you still own those maps?
Yes. Yeah, it's great. In my cupboard, I've got a pile of maps about this high. And it's one of my prized possessions. I marked the whole route off on it and all the little offshoots and yeah.
Awesome. We often chat about this with mates with the adventure. But if you had to choose one highest high and one lowest low from the adventure, now it's probably almost impossible to break that thing down. But could you pick one highest high and one lowest low?
The low was probably the tendonitis in my feet. I've never, and it's so bad. Because the rest of your body's feeling strong, but your feet are saying no. And every single step is just so agonizing. And you just the only thing you can do is normalize it, but it's it sits with you and that was like I said, by the hex I very nearly canned it because of that. Yeah, it's funny because there were lots of other times where there were lots of difficult times, but you're like, oh, I just need to deal with this, and like, but I never, yeah, but that pain around the end of the first week was definitely the worst. The high, yeah, I wonder. It's quite funny. Like it's a difficult thing to pinpoint because there's like it's interesting. Like in the days, like I had these. There were lots of like euphoric moments where you get to the top of a peak and you're like, oh, this is freaking incredible, you know. And then there were lots of times, especially when I was getting close to the end, where I started envisioning the end and I was getting like super emotional and like running and crying and just being like, ooh, I kind of like what's like, what does this mean? And like, what's gone on? And you're like, and which is it's all incredible. But I mean, to be honest, it's actually taken me like probably years to fully process the whole thing. Like, and again, like, I mean, seeing the crew at the end was absolutely amazing. But it's funny because I think it was almost too difficult to properly contextualize everything at that point, like at the rate that it's like happening. And then there's, I mean, it's funny, you have these silent moments. Like I had a lot of moments where I just like sit down and take in the views, you know. It's just like in this absolute still and calm, and like having the privilege to think about nothing more than waking up and running for just having one activity to do for the whole day. It's like it's the greatest privilege. Like, and there's so much of just basking in that and thinking like, for this next month, I'm not looking at my phone. I'm not worrying about what's happening with work. I'm not going to worry about this and that and da-da-da-da. I'm just going to freaking have a blast. So it would almost be harder to, and it's that hidden, like, it's that hidden enjoyment where there's like suffering, but fun and excitement and like, yeah. And it's like, but maybe like, so, you know, when I woke up, like I was talking about the Baviaanskloof, that running in the dark was something I've never experienced. And when I woke up that next morning and I realized that the dirty work was done, like I think that was the only time on the route when I actually phoned people. And I was like, yay, and I think, yeah. So that was probably that Baviaanskloof section, I think, as far as a high. I mean, it's funny because it's high, but it was also one of the most terrified I was, but yeah. Yeah, sure.
I guess maybe you can't have answered it, but your tool set for dealing with the suffering and normalizing suffering.
Mm-hmm.
What were the main tools that you would use? Not having an option to bail. It's funny because I've only given one other talk, which was very shortly after this, and I remember like Stu McConaughey, who was emceeing, well, he kept asking the question of like being alone for like those durations of time, and I think it's a similar question, and yeah, I mean, like I suppose I have had a history of needing to like dig deep. It's not completely unfamiliar with me, but yeah, I think. But I do think like not having any options to quit was like the major one, because it is like there were definitely sections of life or death, and you're like, I can't, if I hang out here anymore, like I'm buggered. Like I can't go back the way I came. I got to go that way. Like make a choice and don't mess it up. And then I think you do that enough and you realize like panic gets you nowhere. Like just zone in for the next like 20 minutes and then deal with whatever comes. And have you brought that to your day-to-day? Is it necessary, or is it just not even applicable?
Yeah, well, it's like I've done a lot of like docu photography. So like I've
like, and you'll actually like, this has been cool because there's a lot of stuff here that I haven't been able to mention in the film, but in the beginning of the film I do mention it. I've spent a lot of time like photographing in like heroin dens in Mexico with drug cartels around me and riots down here and being around like disease and stuff and like having to, yeah, I won't go into the details, but like it's I'm used to having to like make decisions fast from like jobs and stuff I've needed to do and all that. And yeah, so I think that did I think that fed into it before I got there. Probably more so. I'm turning into a bully now. I'm like toning it down a bit. And, like, yeah.
I mean, obviously Long Ridge Line.
Yes.
The section you sort to return to first is like a favorite.
Oh yeah. The Langeberg is very difficult, but it's absolutely exquisite. And it's so rad because it's this one ridge. And then you just, on either side, it's just land as far as you can see. And it's just you on top. And it's steep enough that in sections, it's not an option to go down. You look forward and you're like, that's where I've got to get to. And then you turn around and you're like, that's where I've come from. And it's just the most awesome thing, just going. And again, like if you drive out on the N2 and all that, no, it's so wild because you drive along that ridge and you just see this thing going, zoop, zoop, zoop. And you're like, yeah, it's cool up there. And like, that's the... And it's really, really untouched. People really struggle to hike it because of the lack of water. So it's this incredible position where like you got to rely on fast movement. So it's like fast and light, minimal stuff, and you just have to move. You got to like trust what you take, and that those bare essentials are going to get you across. Like so, it's like again like that becomes this like incredible skill set that defines possibility, and this section like really like plays it out. And it was in like yeah, and it was interesting. Like Ryan Sands called me like was it last year or the year before, and he was looking at it, like making an FKT on that, and he came back and he was like, it's not runnable enough. Like we got to like, and at that point I was like, okay, yeah, but it's. Yeah, and it is. So it's like it's hectic. It's not pretty running. Like you very seldom have flow, but you're up there and you just feel on top of the world, man. Like, and it's really special. Yeah.